Or you can, there you go.
Okay, good evening. My name is Carolyn Connors, and I'm the programming lead at Elephant Artist Relief Society, or EAR, as our friends call us. I would like to begin tonight in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth by honoring and acknowledging Mokitsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Ayaks Nakota and the Tsuut'ina nations. EAR acknowledges that this territory is also cherished by the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We celebrate all nations, Indigenous and non, who honor this land. We are grateful to engage in an honest and eager process of reconciliation. We are all treaty people. On behalf of the EAR leadership team, I'd like to welcome you all. We're grateful to each of you for choosing to spend your evening with us. Thank you for being here. This year celebrates 15 years of service to the local arts community, and our mission has remained the same: to provide practical resources that help sustain the livelihood and practices of artists in the Calgary area. To achieve this, EAR offers monthly professional and personal development talks such as this, a bi-weekly online artist meetup group, a wide variety of community resource information, and our core program of emergency financial relief for the artists who find themselves in a crisis situation. As a charitable organization, we rely on volunteerism, membership, and fundraising to do what we do. You can help us raise awareness, and if you can, consider donating online. Our thanks to those who've already gifted EAR. The Society is 15 this year, and we are encouraging supporters to contribute a monthly donation of $15 to mark this anniversary. Every dollar is allocated to providing relief for artists in times of need. There's just one last bit of housekeeping. Throughout the presentation, we ask that you keep your mics on mute so that there's minimal background interference. You can use the chat box to write your questions as they come up, and we will record those for the Q&A portion of the evening. Now I'll pass you on to our host and moderator for the evening, EAR's own Patricia Duquette. Patricia is a multidisciplinary artist with a long career in the performing arts that expanded to include live action film, animation, media art, visual art, and immersive interactive artworks. In addition to co-founding arts and social justice festivals, Patricia has written, produced, directed, coordinated, and performed in countless productions over the course of more than 3 decades. Her personal works are often marked with visual metaphor, sociopolitical awareness, and commentary. 3 of her most recent short films are currently in festival circulation: The Ancestral Tree, If We Spoke, and Plurality. Patricia is chair of the Fund Development Committee at EAR. So I'll pass it on to her. Enjoy the evening, everyone.
Thanks so much, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So our topic this evening is film, but especially from a grassroots perspective. And our panelists tonight have worn many hats in this industry, as well, in some cases, in related industries. We're waiting for Valerie Planche. Unfortunately, has to be a little late tonight because she is performing in Toronto. So I will make that introduction when she comes in. And for now, what I'll do is introduce Matt Watterworth and Michelle Wong with their biographies. And then I want to pose the question, once I introduce you, if you don't mind, let us know, how on earth did you end up in a cinematic art form? You know, how did that happen for you? And let's just start there. So I'll start with Matt. And please excuse me while I read, and know that's kind of boring, but I actually don't have everything memorized. Matt Waterworth is an alumni of Victoria School of the Arts, SAIT Film and Video, production in the National Screen Institute's Feature First program. He is the co-founder of Full Swing Productions, a creative production company with credits in short film, web series, commercial video, music video, and feature film. Matt directed the revenge thriller feature In Plain View through Telefilm's Talent to Watch program, which is available to stream now on Amazon Prime. He is also the producer and co-host of the Alberta Filmmakers podcast, which completed more than 100 episodes to date. In Plain View was nominated for 8 Rosie Awards at NPS Film and Television Awards, and Matt is the recipient of SAIT's 2015 Outstanding Young Alumni Award and Best of Calgary's 2017 Best Filmmaker Award. Matt produced the feature film Jonesin, which had its world premiere at the Calgary International Film Festival and currently continues its festival journey. Matt took COVID to launch a new venture, No Cap Content, a multi-platform production group creating documentary, transmedia, behind-the-scenes, nonprofit, and XR content. Matt is past vice president of the Calgary Society of Independent Filmmakers and a past board member with the Alberta Media Production Industries Association.
And did you want me to jump in and answer that how did it get started question?
Just go for it.
Yeah, I think it came, well, thank you for such a kind introduction and for having me on the panel, by the way, with such a great group. Got started thanks to one of those teachers in high school that really change your life. And I'm sure we all had, hopefully one. Mr. Steve Ashworth was my video teacher. And I was just interested in acting mainly in high school. And he sort of was this incredible mentor that taught me the power of filmmaking and documentary and storytelling and all that good stuff. So that's kind of how I started. He drove myself and a few other students from Edmonton to Calgary to visit the SAIT Film and Video program, which I ended up taking. So yeah, he was one of those life-changing mentor folks for me.
Wow, it's amazing, right? Like one person can just change your destiny.
So true.
Okay, I'm going to introduce Val, who just arrived. Hi, Val. So glad to see you.
Hi.
Hold on 2 seconds while I pull up your biography, okay?
Okay.
Oh, and then I have a question for you, but we'll do one thing at a time. Valerie Planche, an award-winning director, actor, and arts educator with over 35 years of experience on stage and in film and television. She has facilitated post-secondary classes in the integration of voice, movement, and text at the University of Alberta, the University of Calgary, and Ambrose University, as well as many community-based workshops. A director for 17 years, selected credits include the Canadian premiere of Sweat for the Arts Club in co-production with City Bell Theatre, Constellations for Alberta Theatre Projects, Steel Magnolias, Bad Jews, Skylight for Theatre Calgary, as well as Arden of Faversham for Birmingham Conservatory Stratford. As an actor, Valerie has performed across Canada and the US, garnering awards such as Elizabeth Sterling Haynes Award and Betty Mitchell Awards, She was also awarded an Alberta Film and Television nomination, Best Performance by an Actress. Valerie was awarded the Michelle Diaz Award in 2018 from Theatre Alberta and the Gina Wilkinson Prize from the Shaw Festival in 2015. There we go. Actor extraordinaire, obviously has done dramaturgy work and is a director as well as an educator. Valerie, first question is, how on earth did you get involved with a cinematic art film?
My first love was editing. I hope you can hear me okay, Pat. I'm in my dressing room, so I just want to make, okay, cool. I was at Concordia University and I took filmmaking. And so I loved editing and I loved the frame and the putting together of the visual image. I kind of loved looking at patterns, and in the frame. And moving pictures and storytelling in that way. So my first love was I wanted to become an editor. And then I hate to say, I had a bad teacher. And I had made a film and there was a controversy around it. And I was very young. I think the one thing I regret is that I didn't kind of stand up for myself, right, enough. So I let that kind of push me away. And I went to work for a film distribution company in Montreal. And that was really interesting, doing payroll and kind of learning a bit about that. And then went back to transferred I was taking filmmaking and went into English Lit. And then I had a really good teacher who suggested that I try acting. I was doing a Shakespeare class and he suggested I try acting, and kind of the rest is history. I ended up auditioning for NTS and getting the National Theatre School of Canada and getting in, and then it all went from there, but it was one bad teacher and one really good teacher who kind of really helped me to see where, okay, if that didn't work, then maybe that would.
Yeah, so the vital importance of mentorship, eh?
Yeah. And the words I think you say to people, people think they know what this art form is, and so tell you according to what they know, and I think it can dissuade some people who might have a really strong voice or a different vision, Yeah.
I think that's one thing about, at least my experience into film as an independent artist anyway, is that, I had no formal training. So I started by volunteering on sets and learning how does a film get made. So nobody was sort of saying, well, this is how it has to be, or this is how you got to be, or this is what it's all about. It was really, just getting swept up in the collaborative effort and learning from everyone how, what is that process? And then through those social connections, you start talking about, well, what do you value about it? And, how do you see it? And comparisons are made and judgments are made, but it's plural. It's very plural. So it's I can see how it would have a big impact for somebody who's supposed to know better than you when you're very young, just kind of to tell you, oh no, it's all this way. And then, whether intentionally or inadvertently discourage you from pursuing that interest. That doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't. But I think what it did do is challenge me to really get into story in a different way. And then, so when I came back to story and film as an actor, it made me think about what I was doing differently, you know?
Right, and we're going to touch on that some more in a little bit. Let me introduce Michelle Wong. After receiving her Bachelor of Education degree from the University of Alberta, Michelle began her formal film training at the National Film Board, NFB, of Canada, working with the Oscar award-winning Studio D, where she directed and produced her first documentary, Return Home, following up a decade later with an emotionally powerful Pieces of a Dream, a story of gambling. Michelle's production credits cross all formats, from television movies to feature-length documentaries, performing arts specials, and features. Her most recent credits include executive producer on the documentaries Undetectable: How Stigma Has Gone Viral in the Fight Against HIV by Snapshot Studios as a TELUS original, Business Affairs on the features El Chicano, Come True, Global Meltdown, and on the scripted television projects produced by 724 Films, Heartland by CBC, Jan, CTV, Family Law by Chorus, Fortunate Sons, CBC, and Winona Arp, CTV Sci-Fi. Over the years, Michelle has served on a number of media arts organizations and boards, including most recently the Alberta Motion Pictures Industries Association, AMPIA, as chair of the Finance and Regulatory and the Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Communities, and co-chair of the Professional Development Committee. Michelle was recently elected to sit on the boards of the Canadian Media Producers Association, CMPA, and Women in View, WIV, and is the lead consultant on a series of business affairs, Learning by Doing, which sounds awfully like what we were just talking about. Webinars created for the Canadian Independent Screen Fund. Michelle is also a founding member of Creatives Empowered, an Alberta-based collective of artists and creatives who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, empowering each other as an allied community. Brilliant. Look at those credentials. Woo! Michelle, would you like to tell us how all that started?
Yeah, I will actually, because it's interesting to hear everybody else's profile because, we've been in it for such a long time. When it's been 30 years, it's, like I don't, like I was involved with Herland when Herland was happening. And of course, CSIF is near and dear to my heart, which Matt knows I was part of as well. And Quick Draw, I have walked many paths as everybody does. My start actually was, yes, I was fortunate to go to the National Film Board. They had a program that was set up to train women of color in filmmaking. So I managed to go, but when I applied for the first year, I wasn't chosen as one of the 12 lucky people. So I actually walked into the CSIF and I talked to a woman named Denise Clark, not the dancer, but Denise Clark, the administrative person. And she welcomed me with open arms into CSIF, which is the Calgary Society of Independent Filmmakers, for those of you that don't know. And it was there that I was able to network with a camera person and a sound person. And we went out and I had a story that I wanted to tell. So I guess the question is, how did I get into the film medium? And it's because I had a story to tell. My grandfather actually fell ill and almost died. And when I went to visit him, I realized that I didn't know much about him. And so I did a documentary about my grandparents' lives coming from China to Canada. And then the second year I applied to the NFB, they accepted me and I took the rough cut of the film with me. And they told me that they would train me if I would pay my own way, they would mentor me. So I basically was a starving artist for 3.5 years in Montreal, picking up odd jobs wherever I could, like we can all relate. And I was cutting in 16mm film on a double-headed Steenbeck and dealing with trim bins and all that stuff. And Valerie, I wish you had stayed with it because I think you would have loved it even back then. It was a very tactile kind of art form then. Of course, right when I got there, Avid was just starting to come into focus, and there was a lot of conversation about how the speeding up of the editing process impacted filmmaking, because there is a gestation period for filmmaking that people don't completely understand, because now we have all this digital, quick, let's take the next cut kind of thing. But at the film board, you literally were struggling with, like frames in your film to find the exact moment in which to make the cut that's going to make sense. So, but anyway, that's where I got my training, and I was fortunate enough to turn it into a co-production with the National Film Board, and it became the first Chinese Canadian director, filmmaker, to finish a project at the National Film Board. They had other Chinese projects, but none directed by a Chinese Canadian. So I was the first one, which is nice. But then when it came to festivals, they couldn't pair it with anything because there was only my piece. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that way, but it's kind of, it was just the desire to tell a story and to have it be part of the lexicon of Canadian history, really, because ironically, I'll be going back to St. Paul this June, tied to another organization that's going to be doing a conference up there. And I'll be talking about St. Paul and the impact of it. And so it's kind of neat. Everything's kind of swirling around me and that tiny town and filmmaking. So it's kind of special. But I have to say, no matter where we go, in some ways our stories are in our fiber of our being and never goes away. So I'm an Alberta girl through and through, and I could have stayed in Montreal. Of course, they were grooming me to be a part of the next wave of filmmakers there. And I was still very young. I was like 22, 23. And I just felt like I wasn't prepared to almost become an institutionalized person. Like I hadn't been out into the industry yet. I didn't know what there was. So I made a choice to get educated there and then come back and build my entire career in Alberta, which is what I've done. So, and no regrets, frankly. So that's my story.
That's great. Thank you. Wow. So some really diverse backgrounds here in terms of, how people ended up in this, working with this medium. And I think it probably relates a little bit to my first question, which, I think had to do with training. Like, did you have formal training, and what exactly was it in? I think we covered that a little bit, but do any of you have anything to add? I think Valerie definitely took another route.
Yeah, I think I would say I ended up kind of teaching myself how to, through working with people, through working on film, and working in my friends' garages, actually, how to act on film, though, because I was theater trained. And French Canadian Cree woman, I was always too big. Right? But it was, I really still harbored that love for film. And so we got together once I was in Montreal too, Michelle, and I'm a Montreal girl. And then I went to Toronto and then went out to Alberta and got together with a group of people, and we called it the garage, and we just set up a camera, one of those old VHS video cameras, and started watching each other, which is really hard as an actor to watch yourself, because you can't get away from yourself. But I started seeing, the more we did week by week by week, I started seeing the type of energy, the type of connection that really got me watching, so that was a fun process. And then getting on film, getting great little roles and screwing up, and then realizing what you were supposed to do. If I may, sorry, and I'll tell this story and then I'll shut up, because I'm sure others have stories too. My first acting, I was so excited to get it. I got on set and I was playing this Greek woman who's had to talk about her son, being missing. And David Lorraine was my husband. And we walked up to this desk and told this detective, very teary, emotional, that my son was missing. And so we did the first rehearsal. I'd never done film. I'd never done a role before. And so we did the first rehearsal and they said, okay, great. That's great. Okay, well, just send actors away and then come back and, do the makeup and the hair, the whole bit. I came back and there was a track laid. It was a dolly shot and I was in high heels. And then I had to walk in the track because it was an over the shoulder shot, the first one. And so then it became, okay, Kat, Val, it looks like you have a limp. Could you even, right? So never mind acting. I had to learn what people were doing. So it was that, like, every show I started making friends with a DOP or a grip or somebody to say, what lens are they using? Like, what are they doing now? And so that's kind of, I had to do a self-teaching for how to be on film. Yeah, that's my story.
And we're going to talk about acting specifically a little bit more, but I mean, it is really, having acting technique helps the actor, but in terms of, how to fit into a production process, film and theater do not have the same demands at all. Michelle, do you have education stories you want to share with us?
Yeah, I want to kind of build off what Valerie was saying, because I got a degree in education as a drama major and an English minor, because I was actually interested in screenwriting. I wanted to write screenplays. And if you look in my yearbook, it actually says that. I loved watching television. It's what I wanted to do. And so, but I went through the entire process of getting educated, and I even got a scholarship, and they asked me to stay and pursue an MFA in screenwriting. But I needed to get my ed degree, I thought, so I went off and I became a teacher. And then after that, so I love theater is what I'm trying to say. That's actually my first love, and training was in theater. And I made this sort of mistake of associating like theater with film, and they're nothing the same, obviously. But so a lot of my I guess my commentary is not unlike Val, which is like learn by doing, really. Going to the CSIF was incredibly valuable because everybody was sort of at the same level, and you could ask questions and not be intimidated, and everybody was kind of learning as well. And one of my first volunteer experiences was 40 days on a feature that the SAIT students were doing, and I was the continuity person. So I was just passed this incredibly thick binder from Richard Z and said, look at this is what you're going to do. And I just read it, and the great thing about it is it put me in touch with everybody. I had to go to the wardrobe department, I had to go to the actors, I had to go to the DP and ask for things like the shot and what it is, and I had to draw all these pictures, and I had to do all of these takes, and I had to talk to the director. So it was the perfect kind of experience for me, because it put me in touch with everybody and gave me a function, in a way that people don't really think of in terms of continuity. So my thing was really learning by doing, and also trying to meet, like-minded people, and of course your mentor, right? Like, I'm sure if we were to tell stories that we all eventually met a mentor that took us under him or her wing and started us on the process of kind of figuring things out, because it's pretty intimidating to try to kind of weave your way through it, really. I mean, we all have some talent when it comes to the arts. Like, we have a drive and we have a passion, and those are the things that people can see in us and detect in us, right? And it's what brings people to us, actually, is we want to work with people that we like, right? And so I often find that that's what ends up happening, and that's how you kind of find your mentor, is is you just kind of put yourself out there and you're yourself as much as possible, and then like-minded people will come and become part of your group, I guess. And then that's how you kind of get going with things. So anyway, just wanted to give my 2 cents on that, but that definitely was part of it for me. Just pursuing the stories I had, the passion I had, and meeting the people that were interested in helping out, and I was interested in helping them out. So it was a give and take. I think maybe more then than now. Not sure, but I still believe in mentorship quite a bit. It's incredibly valuable. It's incredibly hard to find, but it is incredibly rewarding when you can find it. And yeah, so there you go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say mentorship, and also just the community that you end up tied with. As you said, Michelle, you know, people that resonate with you, and vice versa. You come together, you start brainstorming, or you hop onto each other's projects and you learn, you know, how else what you learned last time needs to be done to have different aims, you know. And you know, you can trip over things, and things sometimes don't work the way well, most of the time don't work the way you plan. So there's a lot of learning in there, and brainstorming and problem solving that's done collectively, even with a hierarchy, right? Of like who's in charge of who and where and what department and all that. So yeah, it's really the doing. And even Val was talking about you know, having colleagues or fellow students in a garage together, you know, reviewing tapes and commenting and feedback, and you know, using our critical faculties and really questioning, you know, what is it? There's one thing in your head, but what is it that somebody else what is being evoked in their head, in their hearts, in their memory, in their walk through life when they see something on the screen. So, you know, those are big leaps to make, and it's an awful lot of experience that adds up to even kind of a little bit have a confidence. Like, I'm not even sure I still do. I just kind of keep trying. That what you're attempting to convey and create as an experience will translate the way you intended. Matt, did you have a related story you wanted to share with us?
I would echo some of the comments about mentorship. I think mentorship is such an incredibly powerful, it can be an unbelievable unlock when it comes to time saved to, you know, for things that could take a really long time to sort of discover on your own, or you know, waiting until the right sort of variables fall into place. And I mean, yeah, mentorship can save, and has saved me, I think, probably years as far as, you know, progressing through my own career. So yeah, but you're right that it's hard to come up upon, Michelle, and we need more. I think we need more structure around that, because it's so powerful if you can find a good mentorship, and it can go both ways as well. You know, especially now as I'm sort of heading into mid-career. I've been in this world for almost 15 years now. I'm finding myself on both sides of it. I'm mentoring and menteeing, and so yeah, there's so much power to it. And the only other thing that comes to mind on this topic is how frustrating I find, especially with, you know, the influx of work that we have happening in Alberta when it comes to film and television, how I get upset about the way we demonize curiosity. And not just in film and television, but like on a societal level. Like at a certain point, you're just kind of expected to know things, and if you don't, you're asking a dumb question. And I just wish that would stop. And anyway, maybe my note there, yeah, my note there would be to encourage everyone to not be afraid to ask what might be perceived as a stupid question. It's probably not. It's probably someone's attitude is the real problem. And so I think film sets can be sometimes a toxic arena in that sense, and it's kind of too bad. But I do see it changing, at least from my perspective. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think the time is money, especially when you're on, the bigger budget sets, the tick, 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 tick is if you're supposed to just, have your path set out for you and execute it without a hitch. It would dissuade someone that's emerging or, maybe not as experienced, from asking questions for sure. And I think that doesn't work. That doesn't work in anyone's favor, really, because
It's not good for anybody. Yeah.
no, because some of those, errors we can make tip over dominoes that cost production even more. So, they don't benefit from it, and your own feeling of confidence and capacity is going to be impacted by that, which just makes everything worse. So, yeah, I mean, in my view, for sure, I would concur. The question, I hear these, and we see memes and stuff like fake it till you make it. And I actually don't buy that at all. Like there isn't anything.
Especially not today.
No.
I think it used to work a lot better, but it's not the same.
No, I think unless you're a remarkable con person, you're going to be better off just really, in a modest context, being transparent about your curiosity, your interest, what you'd like to know, what problems you want to solve, what problem you're facing, and asking someone for solutions. That's really your way forward in my view. That's learning. Yeah. And I think that applies, to acting, producing, doing the books, marketing, I mean, whatever part of this industry you're part of. Let me just look again. What are questions? Which I might have lost. There we go. So yeah, actually that kind of is a segue. The next question I had was, we're hearing a lot about how commercial film work has exploded here in Calgary, which of course, there's lots of crossover, and that means work for a lot of people who work in film. But of course, these are highlighted by some very big budget projects coming in from the States and do not necessarily describe grassroots activity. So my question is, how has this impacted each of you? Have you previously or are you currently involved with a union? If so, did this transform your experience with filmmaking? And if not, what were your reasons for remaining independent? So we go back to Val.
I kind of in some ways want to go last because we have two incredible filmmakers here. And so would that be okay? Like I would love to defer to Matt or Michelle or first if you guys would go. And I think that would be really helpful for me, to start there.
Of course, Matt, Michelle, either one of you feel like jumping in on that one? It's kind of a three-part question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I don't mind actually. Let me take a stab at it because I've been at it quite a long time, and I think in the overarching way of how have I managed to sort of sort through it is I've always had a split personality around what I do. I always have an arts focus, and I have an industry focus, and I have a Chinese focus, and I have a Chinese Canadian focus. And so I've always tried to balance those two things, even when I was, going into the industry. And I started at a company as a office PA, and Matt can relate to this. And, and I kind of always knew that I needed a cash flow job. I needed something that would bring me money so that I could do my passion projects. So that's kind of the approach that I took when I was in my 20s, and still today it's the same thing. So now after 30 years, I'm now like business affairs at this, you know, large Western Canadian production company, in which I'm doing like these really big budgets and doing applications and handling like this incredibly large stuff. And then on the other hand, when I have free time, and I do carve out free time, I'm helping other independent filmmakers with their projects, because I feel like there's a balance there between that kind of stuff, and also like there's an Indigenous director, actor, writer who's done a project, and I've kind of come on board to help her, and Matt knows a bit about this project because it's related to St. Paul, and St. Paul's trying to do a film initiative, and they're looking for a project to go up there. And I asked this filmmaker to consider going to St. Paul because her feature, her first feature, is all about growing up in a small town, and all the kooky things that she did when she was a young woman, like a teenager basically. And so it's going to fit. Like I've had them go up there and scout it, and I'm pretty sure, fingers crossed, that it's going to go up there, and she is going to be able to access the film initiative grant that they've set up. And so for me, that feels really good, because I feel like I can make an impact in someone's life in a it's a smaller project, but the impact is great. And so that gives me a lot of fulfillment in my heart about it. Of course, I want to do a good job in my other job, and I do. But when it comes to, so that's where it is for me, is a balance between sort of seeing where the need is, seeing if I have the time to be able to help, and almost be like a hub, because she would not have known about this initiative, right? At all. It started a year in advance. And really part of it was like, you know, Matt started and planted the seed with a friend that lives up in St. Paul, and they were buddies in high school. So it's really neat, the story of the initiative and how it kind of has all of these, you know, and I know Matt, and you know what I mean? Like it's got these really cool community rooted things. And yet to recognize the potential of being able to bring the things to the table, right? Because this filmmaker would not have known. Matt wasn't sure. I was helping, you know, coordinate the application process and what it can look like and all that. And I really wanted to bring a project up to St. Paul so that they could feel success in their initiative, because I really believe in what they're doing and they should do more of it. So I feel like it's almost like a meant to be thing, like, you know, creativity, we know what that feels like as creative people, right? On a whole other level, we know that we're participating in a co-creative experience when we're doing our art. And there are really special moments where it truly is bigger than we are. So now 30 years into it, I feel like I can give back in ways that I don't even know. Like I didn't know about this project till 6 months ago, until someone from Creatives Empowered referred me to the filmmaker, right? And said, oh, Michelle, I think you can maybe help blah, blah, blah with her project. So again, you know what I mean? Like there was another kind of relationship there that wouldn't have been there, you know, 8 months ago. So it's being able to recognize that and bringing it together and helping it along. So I think that, you know, in terms of the industry now, absolutely, it's a monster. It's a beast. The government is interested in jobs, 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 and their word for diversification isn't cultural diversification, it's job diversification. That's how they're pitching it to people to get involved. And absolutely, there are ways to get involved, but I'm too old to work 18 hours a day, and I never did like working that way. So that was never an option for me. And I will recommend to young people that are kind of wondering what to do to absolutely approach the unions, do your flag person course, you know, like become a permittee, go through the experience of it, find out if it works for you or not. It doesn't hurt. And obviously in the bigger stream of things in the industry, we're dealing with Um, Alberta wanted the jobs. Alberta wanted to change the tax credit system to be able to bring in more projects. Of course, we knew that that meant that the service aspect of the industry would come crashing in. Because when you look at BC, BC is primarily a service-based industry. If you look at Toronto, there's a little bit more diversity there where it's not just industry. In BC, it primarily is a $4 billion industry. And now that stuff is flooding into Alberta because BC is completely booked up. And now what we're looking at as producers and creative beings is all the good crews are being scooped up by these big productions. And, you know, people kind of want to, you know, get that big paying job for 6 months and get some good money. But also what it's doing is it's hurting. It's really condensing the independent producer reality to the point where it's a struggle to find people. It's a struggle to compete with the cachet of saying, I'm part of the Netflix movie. You know what I mean? Like when you say that, people just automatically just give you check marks and accolades. And, you know, as a person in the industry, you get to feel good, like I'm on this show. But really what's happening is, in a larger sense, is there is a metamorphosis, I think, happening within the industry where these big shows that come rolling in and what they're really doing is planting the seeds of a service industry. And so when we think about the independent players and still trying to talk to the government about it, but you know, it's kind of too late now, right? When they decided to open the floodgates, it was a desperation ploy to bring in jobs, right? Like they needed a feel-good story, and that was the feel-good story. And now we're having to face the reality of what that means. So even more so now, I have, you know, a soft spot in my heart for independent producers because it's going to get harder and harder. And of course, what's the challenge is people, you know, go to the CSIF, they get trained, they learn stuff, they network, but then everybody kind of still kind of, you know, needs to go and get a job and make money. And so you're still having this push and pull between people that will make the choice to help an independent producer versus taking the big job on the over-the-top service for 6 or 8 months and get a big, huge paycheck, right? Which is always going to be the thing that we're looking at. And that squeeze, I will always argue that film cooperatives are absolutely important. It's not just going to the unions and getting trained and then becoming part of that system. I find the independent co-ops are incredibly important because we have to keep educating people about what being an independent producer is, how you actually do have control over your content, that you have final say, not just, you know, the big machine that's saying, you know, you have to tweak it like this, you have to do this, you know, and lose control basically of your project. So I do always have a soft spot for people that are trying to make that independent production, because that actually ironically is where the original content is. And you try to convince broadcasters of that, right? But they're so thinking about the, you know, the multi-series stuff and how many pieces are involved and all the people that have agents that are going to be writing those scripts and acting in those things, but the really original stuff is not necessarily coming out of that old system of how things get written. It's much deeper and it's much more grassroots than that. And it's the story that's coming out of, you know, someone's personal experience in a small town, like growing up when they're 18, right? Like the authenticity of that story, that's where it comes from, not just the system and working with the top writers and working with the top, you know, like it's not just that. So I'm hoping that we continue to support that part in Alberta, because we do have a voice. Alberta is a very specific place. We have very specific stories to tell. And it's the only way to kind of not be absorbed by the bigger, massive machinery, which is always hanging over our heads.
Thanks for that. I would concur with absolutely all of that. And I would say, you know, I think not to just throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I think what isn't valued alongside, this celebration of a film boom in Alberta is, if we're not telling our own stories, that has an impact on how people see themselves represented and how they relate to what's going on in their own society. It has social political implications, and ultimately it erodes our cultural values. Or if it doesn't erode it succumbs to somebody else's cultural values, or it adopts it. You know what I mean? So those are pretty big issues, actually, that aren't being discussed at all, while we're seeing our current government anyway, Yahoo and Yippee and dance around. That's a lot that's not being discussed. Matt, do you have? I'm sure you do.
Of course, yeah. I actually, I haven't seen the story yet, but City TV just did a story on what is The Last of Us ending sort of mean for the local community, and I'll go to dinner at my girlfriend's family's house, and her aunt will lean over and say, "Oh, I'm hearing about all this film stuff happening in town. This must be great for you?" I'm like, well, I think there are some definite indirect bonuses. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't really mean anything for the writers and the directors and the even the cinematographers. A lot of the what we call above the line roles are, understandably, they're not, Fargo's not going to happen and say, "Hey, Matt, come direct an episode of Fargo," just because you're here. It's not going to happen. But I do think there are some upsides, and one of them is, The Last of Us is the largest production Canada's ever seen, and so that in and of itself, let alone all the other production that's happened as well, it puts Calgary on the map in a way that is really positive, in a way that we haven't been before, at least from the global film perspective. So I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think you could even see a little bit of that. I was at the Banff World Media Festival these last few days here, and you could see a little bit, I think, in the global community, some understanding that, oh, okay, Alberta's maybe going to be a major player here soon. The question is, are we going to be a player in the way that Vancouver is, which is very service production, as Michelle pointed out, or are we going to be more of a Toronto, which seems to be more of the homegrown production? And like Michelle said, we're definitely going down the Vancouver route right now. And so I would say that there are some things that we can do as a local community that might be able to help bring some of those indirect bonuses to the local community as well. And one of those things is making sure that we're connecting and networking. And I think in Calgary specifically, we have a problem with siloed organizations, and a lot of, the spirit of Calgary is very much like, I'm going to do it myself. And that's great in many ways, but filmmaking is a team sport, and we do need to know each other and get on the same team in many ways. And so we have organizations, and as a board member and facilitator at CSIF, I'm guilty of it for sure. Putting on workshops that, someone else put on a very similar workshop the next weekend, and oh geez, if we just connected a little bit more, we could have avoided that, or joined forces a little bit. So I think if we can get better connected to each other, one of the biggest things that I hear and I experience is, how do I fund my own project? How do I get my project funded? And if I can say, hey, I've got, my director of photography just worked for a year on what could be the biggest show in the world, The Last of Us, as an assistant camera person. And so that's huge. Like, that's great for my application. That, that's sort of bringing some of that shine over to a local production. So if we can find some of those routes, I think there's also opportunities, and I'm hoping that CSIF and other organizations can find ways to make this happen. I haven't really heard or seen it happen yet. But when you have some of these world-class creators, like the team behind the new Predator movie, the trailer's coming out right now, or has been out for a little while, world-class Hollywood folks coming in and more than welcome to use our resources and facilities and incentives. But can they give back in some way? Like, is there a way we can formalize a masterclass or a way to connect them with our local creators as well, and actors as well? So yeah, I think there are some indirect bonuses, but I think we could hustle a lot harder to find some more pluses for the local community too.
Absolutely, those are great ideas. And I think, you know, perhaps even the way that Canada has repeatedly attempted, at least, to create a, Canadian content fund, especially because, our cultural industry is dominated by the US. We definitely haven't done enough and need to do more, but I wonder if each region couldn't do the same thing. Like, these are incentives, tax-wise, and certainly, local resources and below the line, a lot of local talent. So, is there a way that we can ensure that, this bleeds out into the broader community so that, there's a little more support for the above the line and for those local stories to be told, to be generated. And, since we're on the topic, no, actually, I'll let Val. I'm sorry, because you touched on something that also is a question I wanted to pose to you all, because that's the most common thing I hear all the time too. How do we get this project funded? Number one question. But before we do that, let's hear from Val, who's probably going to have a whole other perspective when it comes to, what do these projects bring to Albertans or people living in Alberta and practicing in Alberta, but also about unions.
Well, I'm fascinated to hear both of your stories, your perspectives, because, and I wanted to hear them first, and I'm glad, because as an actor, I thought that it would be different for creatives, for directors or for independent producers, and it's not. So I'm sorry and thank you, and I feel a little more connected to you as an actor, and I'm an actor who I need to say hustles and has been gifted with some work, and I think it's partly because of my skill. Yes, I'll say it's also because I'm white. My challenge is that I'm an older woman and a woman of some weight and not traditional beauty standards. And I say all of those things because as an actor, it's frickin' brutal in our province. And it's so funny. I've heard you both say, I get it. This above the line, you need to make money. You need to get, these names that are that recognition that helps money come in and then helps sell your project. What fascinates me, though, is that European productions, many that I see, don't do that. Many British shows that I see now, that pay schedule is different, and I know they have their own issues, but the people that you see are not always the same people, and the look, the style is very I'm going to use this word homogenous, but I don't mean the same, right? I mean that it reflects a broader community, and I think is getting more and more so. I don't in any way think, I think that's changing as well in terms of reflecting that diversity that you were talking about, Michelle. But I am a member of both the theater and the film union, and I am that because twofold. if I'm not taken seriously. And that lets me out of some projects, but I also have the ability to talk to my union to say, I want to do this. And as I get older, I do try to exercise that right. So if I do, like with Nina Sudra, or if somebody, you know, if Ms. Waddell or somebody comes to me with a project and it's an independent project, then I am happy to go to ACTRA and say, how can we do this? How can we do this so that I get to do that for this experience? Because this is a role that I wouldn't get to do there, you know, because as I try to put myself up, and now I'm not, the thing I've done is I don't take actor roles. I know that's a hard thing to say, but I can't, you know, it does pay the bills, but it becomes, you know, coming into to audition for one word or for a line, when you say it could be anybody, you know, and so I've stopped myself there and I've said, no, okay, if I want to do this, then I actually want a character. It could be one scene. I don't care. It could be 5 lines in one scene, you know, and it's, I love to be a principal. So over 6 lines, I think that's what it is. But it gives me then that sense that I'm actually using my skills in a way. But the challenge that I have in our community is that, and this is, I've been in the Calgary community, I can't believe, for 30 years now. And it's when they talk about talent, they only talk about crew. I realized that like 10 years back. And that made me really sad, you know, because I know so many, like I can name you 25 or 30 actors that are capable, that have done the work, that put in the work, that work with me, that we work together, or that work independently on their own, that try to do, you know, go through the connecting, and they just can't get on sets, you know, and then we have to sit back as actors and watch a 5-line role go to somebody from Vancouver when I know 5 people. So that's disheartening and understandable, but I don't know how to fight that. I've had conversations with Tina over the years about that. And in Vancouver, partly because they're battling that service industry, which, Matt, thank you for that service versus independent, both of you. I appreciate that perspective. And I want to help fight for that. I don't know how we do that. But I think what happens with the service in Vancouver, they've been able to fight to be able to say, you look at Vancouver first, you know, and in Winnipeg, they've started to be able to do that. How do we do that in Calgary? How do we ask our casting directors to say, no, like there are a number of roles here. I know that means that some productions won't come here, but how do we manage that so that we can grow our independent, we can support, we can help our artists work, you know, because the pandemic hit so bad. And then we thought, oh yeah, okay, that maybe some local people will get work. Well, no, it actually, the pandemic opened up the field, which is great because more people can be seen. What it did was put the onus on the actor financially. The burden became greater because now you have to be your own editor. You have to be your own, you have to do your own setup. You have to purchase that, you know, the equipment for that setup. And how do you do that when you're not working? You know, you pay for if you're doing voice work, you have a microphone. If you're doing acting, you have to get your lights and your sound. You have to be in a space that is, you know, you have to have a good background. You have to, you know, you have to have sound and lighting equipment. it's just become unbearable and untenable for some people who are not making money. So, you know, in some ways, the casting has put the financial burden off onto the actor. So that's a real battle that I'm hearing from fellow actors. And I struggle because then that also makes this art form elitist. If you can afford it, you can be an actor. And that lets a lot of people out of the mix, right? I am lucky because my husband is not in the business, you know, so what he gives up is a second income from someone. You know, when I have a good year, and that's why I do film, television when I can in the summers, and I direct and act in film on stage, and I teach, because somehow I managed to make, you know, a teacher's salary. I managed to make enough to pay GST, you know. It's like, but so I don't know how we support that. So I'm part of a union, and I am that way, and I speak more about that because it's so difficult. Not only are you facing all of those beauty standards, those standards of, you know, American age, ability, race, you're also faced with, can you afford it? Can you give a good product on your audition? It's like, holy shit, how do we even get in the damn door? And I have been lucky because I got a small role on Under the Banner of Heaven and on Billy the Kid, you know. And so you end up feeling so grateful, and then at the same time resentful, because you think, okay, I'm putting it out there, and I get 7 auditions, where in Toronto I may get, you know, 7 a week. I get 7 over a summer, and I may get 2, right? And then how do I justify all that? So I hear the same stories from you both, though, and I think, oh shit, that makes me riled up. And I think, how do we advocate for that in our smaller community as we grow? Thank you for those perspectives. Yeah.
I think it is.
Well said. Well,
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, I think part of it is that if we expect to model the Canadian industry after the American one, which is increasingly the case, then yeah, I mean, you know, there's way more people that live down there and way more wealth and great big, huge, enormous legacy companies and budgets that are bigger than, you know, the expendable income of entire nation states. And, you know, they will have star power, you know, because they can dole out the millions of dollars for those names. And they will have, you know, very, you know, whoever's the latest, greatest director, or the latest, greatest editor, or the latest, greatest screenwriter, or the latest, greatest. And then, you know, and for those watching, you know, that's what we mean by below the line and above the line, right? Like there's talent above a certain line that they're bringing in to Canada. And then below that line, you know, to some degree, they are obligated to hire Canadians. So that's where our own talent, not exclusively, but, you know, if you're an independent filmmaker and storyteller or screenwriter or producer, you know, that's not the jobs you're doing for these companies. That's not the experience you're getting for those if you go and work with them. And so your own portfolio and your own material and your own content, you know, we still don't know, you know, every time we still don't know how we're going to fund that. And it's a very big issue for Canadian artists all the way around. And, you know, I think yes, there's changes that in evolution on a grassroots level that has to happen, like that actors now are basically their own filmmakers in order to submit an audition. Pardon me. Like they're not DOPs. They're not editors. They're not, but they're doing all that so they can submit an audition tape. And then somehow, you're going to have to brand yourself on social media. So you're also a marketer and a publicist and and I think artists in general are facing very similar challenges as we're trying to meet some kind of bar that actually isn't, it's being imported. It's not actually addressing our local issues. So yeah, those are all really important issues that I'm glad that we're discussing here, and I'm sure we're going to come back to it for sure. Let me just see what I actually had planned for a question. We don't have to stay on script either. Like I'm so happy for your input. You guys are all brilliant. Okay, and in fact, it is exactly what Matt was talking about. My question was, the most common question I hear surrounding independent initiatives is how to fund it. And I know Michelle has a great deal of experience with the financial side of this work. So maybe we'll start with her, but I'm asking all of you, how would you impart to someone new to soliciting support for the making of a film?
Shall I go first? Yeah, that's definitely the question that I always get asked because of what I do, which is business affairs. That's part of what my role is, to make the applications to go in to get the money. And to be honest, there definitely is a different approach from an independent producer standpoint, and the money that's available and the grants that are available and the programs that are available, versus if you're moving more towards an industry style where you're looking at a distributor and you're, I just want to quickly say that, yes, we do have the uncapped Alberta FTTC, which is the tax credit program, but we also have what's called the Alberta Made grant program, which is, I think the amount of money that's available in that program is too low, and the budget range is also a bit low. So, so the way that we can have more projects done is the money that's in the pot to do the Alberta Made projects needs to be increased, because that will absolutely create more projects that will then be able to get funded, and then that leads to independent productions that will be more open to hiring people like Valerie, as opposed to feeling like they have to, listen to distributors and broadcasters and do name brand people and all that stuff, right? Not that we don't have that talent, but that's why the independent industry is important, because Valerie could get a lead in a feature length production, where her chances of getting a lead on an American show is hard because there's just so much more competition, right? The stakes are so much greater, all that kind of stuff. So part of it's that. I mean, yeah, we have programs like the TELUS Story Hive, TELUS Optic, and that's like Story Hive's 20,000 for a project, and then TELUS has an Optic where they would give up to 200,000, right? And then they would take the online broadcast rights for that, and then you would try to combine that with the Alberta Made, depending on the size of your budget, and then whether or not you push it above $500,000, and then you could go into the non-juried Alberta FTTC program. But that also means you have to incorporate a company. It means that you have to step up, right? Make that next step. And the cost of doing that and the intimidation factor of doing that can dissuade producers from having to take that next step. So it's knowing how that works. So you're kind of stuck at a certain level of making films in the 20,000 to 30,000 range, and then trying to cobble a little bit more money together, or maybe do it for like 100, 120. And then there's this line where it just sort of, then it jumps up in this way and can be very intimidating for people. So is there money? Yes. Is it competitive? Absolutely. I mean, we have, of course, the Alberta Foundation, and I would estimate they probably fund 1 in, let's say 7. I mean, I'm just taking a guess. They statistically would maybe give you that. 1 in 7 applications, maybe 1 in 6 applications, just depending on how many applications they get in a particular tranche, and you know, the amount that's being asked for, all that kind of stuff. So it's not great, right? Your chances of, I'm sorry, I meant 1 in 12. Yeah, you're right. I saw your face, Patricia. You're right. It's about 1 in 11 or 1 in 12. That's actually more accurate. Sorry. In terms of all the applications they get and people that actually get the money that they ask for. When you think about what happens in Ontario, yeah, you get more auditions because there's more production, right? So that's why. That's automatically why Valerie gets 7 auditions in a week, and here we get 7 auditions in a year, because how many shows do we have in Alberta? A handful. How many shows do we have in Ontario? Hundreds, actually. So if you actually look, if you drill down into the detail of what happens in each province, it'll show you it'll show you why there is more robust activity in certain places. And in Alberta, it's still there are still work to be done to be able to build up this other part of the industry, which has never been the strongest, to be honest. And even when you try to, I'm not even sure what the word to use is anymore, because we used to call it Indigenous film production, which meant that it was stuff that was created in Alberta. Now that term doesn't make sense, obviously. So I'm not sure what that term is when it comes to projects that are homegrown, developed, and written and planted here in this province. And you know what I mean? Like, I don't even have the word to describe it, right? So that tells you that there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And Matt might know, because Matt's got some really good groups going, and he's doing more, you know, networking with people trying to get into stuff. But I find, okay, I can't use that phrase, but I can't even explain the difference between sort of a company that does develop its own work, as opposed to people just thinking that we only do service work, because that's not true either. But the minutia of that and explaining that over and over and over gets very tiring, because there isn't a thorough understanding of it. So obviously, if you're an independent producer and you know, you're putting your shingle out there, it's more obvious. But when you go become a company, then it gets a little bit mushy. Like, you know, like for what excuse me, for what you do, Matt, I'm not sure that people understand. You know, are you co-producing? Are you doing your own thing? Are you doing service? Are you doing corporate? You know what I mean? Like, it all kind of gets smashed together. It's not clear. And what it takes to kind of go to that next level. And it usually means people, and it means overhead, and it means responsibility, that even, you know, you're doing a short film and you're kind of financing it yourself, and you're kind of doing your Visa cards, and you're sort of doing it that way. And we've all done it. I've done it too. But it gets harder when it's over 100,000, and even that's not a lot of money, right? And all of a sudden you're trying to put together $100,000. It gets more complicated, and the risks become much more acute. I mean, there are ways to get to it, and I have ideas around it, obviously, but it's still a big step to go from doing something in a $20,000 range, or 40,000, 60, and then jumping up to like 150 or 200 or 250, or like when you don't even own a house, right? But you're spending half $250,000 on a film. you don't even own your own house, right? So it's kind of like, I don't know. I had to explain that to my mother. She didn't understand like how I could do that. But anyway, it's definitely a curve of sorts for us here in Alberta. And that's why I do say we always have to fight for the independent producer that's here, maybe that's the only phrase that one can use, the independent producer here. That's doing those projects, and that means our people above the line, below the line will get first choice in positions, because they're Albertan, and even though the structure isn't as stringent as it used to be, it's still an Alberta cost. It's still a rebate attached to it, and that's a good thing. So, but we need more money in certain programs so that we can keep growing that part of our industry, because there's no doubt when you release a cap on the other side, right? Like, that's why these big, huge, 50 million, 60 million, 100 million, that's why it's rolling in, because they don't want to wait 3 years to shoot in BC. They will shoot it this year in Alberta, and they will deal with the shortcomings of it, because they don't want to wait 3 years to get to the queue to be able to shoot in the middle of BC. They will do it in Alberta. So,
Thanks, Michelle. Matt, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know what the answer is either, Michelle, when it comes to terminology. It's especially in this business, is so difficult and weird and confusing on so many levels. I'm actually working with this wonderful young woman named Neha, who is U of C. She's getting her master's in sort of, I'm not sure what the actual program is, but in producing film, right? But on a self-guided level, because there's not really such a thing as far as I'm aware. But so she and I have been working together for the last year or so, and seeing the film industry through her lens as sort of an outsider with an academic perspective has been really interesting. And she's like, what does the word producer mean? I've been looking, like, there's so many different terms and meanings. Local creators. And I'm even kind of backing away from the word filmmaker in some ways, because there's XR and VR and people don't feel like they are filmmakers if they're an actor or a writer or a PA, and I think you absolutely are. But anyway, so I think creator is the word I'm using now. I don't know what to do. But when it comes to financing, I'll give a really quick rundown of what I thought my trajectory could be and what it has actually been, which is, artist is a great, absolutely. And so when I started out, I assumed that, okay, I'll start with smaller budget films and kind of work my way up. And I think that's still a valid goal. But having done sort of a $250,000 film and then a $350,000 film, and now being part of the team on what's becoming almost a $2 million film, I want to go the other way. I want to go with an $80,000 film. I want a crew of 7. And you see these films and they work, right? And I haven't done it yet myself, but can we just get through the process on something more simple? And then the math behind, well, do films make money, gets a little more understandable to me, because I still don't really understand how you can pour millions of dollars into a film and unless you're a Hollywood institution or a broadcaster in some way, and you have multiple routes of revenue. If I can spend $60K on a film and then make $100K on it, well, then I'm golden. But if I'm only making $100K on a $250,000 film, well, I'm in trouble, right? So yeah, I'm going the other direction. I'm trying to find projects that are a little bit smaller, more intimate. I mean, Sean Crawford just released a film called Here and After, which was a sort of a sci-fi, two-hander, 2 actors, I think a crew of 7, black and white. And it was brilliant, and it was really well received. And he even got some distribution looks on it. And for some technical reasons, I think that couldn't happen. But no reason why you couldn't fix those in the next try. So I think there's room for it. And although today is an interesting time when Netflix I was about to say, well, everybody wants content, right? Content, there's so many platforms, but I'm worried that we're actually at a new pivot point when it comes to streaming, because when Netflix announces subscriber loss and dropping, I'm not quite sure what that means for, like you say, Michelle, like studios in Vancouver booked up for 10 years, and we don't want to wait. I'm curious about what's going to happen over the next year to the streaming world, because the negative thing that's come with that is yeah, exactly, Val. The negative thing that's come with that is oh, there's so much production, and there's so many, you know, places for it. But what I've heard from reading articles with people who, you know, work for the streamers is like Netflix actually wants to spend more money on, you know, Stranger Things, $31 million per episode or something like that. Like they want to find ways to spend more money to make their content even more prestige, because that's the battle now, and it's just not a fight I can even pretend to get involved in. So yeah, I think we may be in an interesting pivot moment in that whole world, as maybe the golden years were when, because Netflix and all of these firms are propped up by tech, right? It's tech moguls and tech investors that have invested in these streaming platforms, because, well, it'll all pay off down the line. But if Netflix is saying, not only do we not gain subscribers, we lost 200,000 and we predict 1 million in the next quarter to go away, it's going to change some things for sure. So yeah, it's an interesting discussion. And I know, Michelle, you think about it all the time too, if the film finance puzzle, and it changes so often. Like you can't, you know, I'm a huge fan of Kevin Smith, but as a filmmaker, you cannot copy Kevin Smith's journey now. You can't do it. Because the number of distributors that were available, small distributors, doesn't exist now. They've all been conglomerated. So anyway, I could go on.
Well, I was going to say, don't forget that not even 5 years ago, there probably was only a Netflix to talk about, right? Now there's Prime, Amazon, Apple, you know, like there are a lot of Hulu, there are a lot of players that have come into the arena now. And now Netflix is feeling the pinch of it, right? Because they used to be the only real, you know, because of how they started. So there's also that as a fact. And also the broadcasters are recognizing now that they have to also pivot and start to invest in their own online streaming viewership and platforms. So I think even the broadcasters are starting to create other relationships that you know, like hybrid relationships between still trying to do the CanCon, still trying to honor the system of the CMF, the Canada Media Fund, but then also seeing the future, right? I mean, this is what the bill sorry, I'm going to get the number wrong, so I won't say it. You're right. That's the battle that's happening right now, and it's an incredibly important battle, because if it's lost, it won't even be CanCon that will be thrown out the window. It'll be everything. And then yeah, like when you take a system and smash it, it's the reverberations are huge. So that battle is incredibly important to have, because you know, you can't throw everything away, because what can replace can be really detrimental to our system. So on that realm, I am a CanCon person for sure, but we definitely see the eroding of it when we think about who the broadcaster is, and if it's an over-the-top service, then more the word service comes into play, and less about the Canadian part, because it's a money thing. How can you compete with such a large neighbor with so much money, really? So more and more, that's definitely the battle that we're all very aware of, no matter what. Yeah.
Val, do you have thoughts on this topic?
No, I think you both have said it and know it much more intimately and in depth than I do. I just share the concern. Yeah, I don't have anything to add, Pat.
I think we might be at break time. Can I ask Carolyn or Marco to chime in here?
Sure. Did we want to stop the discussion and have a break and then go to Q&A?
I think we don't have time for the rest of our questions, but you know what? No regrets. You're all very insightful, and your commentary is really appreciated.
Yeah, it's been awesome. So what we'll do is we'll take a break for maybe about, I don't know, 8 or 10 minutes, and I will put a link to a feedback form that we like to get feedback from everybody at our events about the event and other questions that might come up. And so then if you could respond to that, that would be great. And then I haven't seen any questions yet. So if anybody has any, please put them in the chat, or you could just bring them up later when we come back from the break. Okay.
And I'll just add that this survey can be done in a couple of minutes. So,
Yeah, it's just
please,
really quick.
if
So
you can, it would be much appreciated. Thanks.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
So-
definitely.
So it's 8:36. How long should we do? Like 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Let's say back in 8:46. Okay. Yourselves. We can go back to the first question that I saw. Let's see, where was it? Oh, here. It was a question for Val. It says, what has been your favorite role of your career so far?
Oh.
That's a tough one, hey?
No, I thought it was Margot, a question for all of us. Tell us about a greatest achievement.
Well, that one is
in there was, okay.
But we could start, we could use that question. We could ask all of you that question, but we could start with you.
Great. So I think my greatest achievement is still being here after 35 years. I don't know, really. Yeah, I think my greatest achievement is watching some of my students and some of my mentees who are mentors as well, which is great. Find a new way in this world that is burgeoning, like the change is so expansive for all of us that I am always amazed when they've come out and come back to me and said, well, you said this, you said to do this or to go and do it. And so I did, and here I am. And that's always amazing to me. But I think it's the show that I'm in. And when it's seen on stage, or when I watch a film and that I've been a part of, and, after 30 years, you get to know the crews, and that's I celebrate with the collective. I really do. I'm not an individualist in that way, because I believe what both of you have said, that I can't do what I do without the grip who's holding that damn flag, because the light is changing. Like I can't, so I love that celebration with everybody when something is really good. And the discussion when you go, oh, I thought that was, what could we have done that was different on that? This part was great, that part wasn't, I really appreciate that. As a director on stage, and I've never, maybe before I die, if like I ever win the lottery, I'll get either of you to be a mentor, and I'll make a film before I die. I don't know. I'd love to do that.
Please do. Please do.
Yeah, that's me, I think.
Okay. Would you say, did I hear you correctly when you said you felt like the role you're in now is your favorite one?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's always the one I'm in.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That was the
current
one.
Yeah.
And there's some that are not so fun, and we'll just forget those because they're done and I don't ever have to think of them again. Right. But on film, I really enjoyed Blackstone because I had a 5-season arc. I've never had that. It's rare for an actor in Alberta that lives in Alberta to have that. And the learning that I did over those 5 seasons is invaluable. My question for both you filmmakers are that, like, as an actor, I know how tough it is to learn and a director on stage, you know, when you're dealing with $150,000 stage productions, but I can't even imagine how you learn to direct and produce, like, because it's a solitary act that you can learn by doing, right? Yeah, so I have some amazing stage productions that I'm really proud of. Yeah, but I can't even imagine with film.
Wow. Well, thank you. Okay, let's carry this question about your greatest achievement. How would you answer that one, Michelle? Are you there? Oh, here, there
Yeah.
you go. Yep,
Yeah,
there you
yeah,
are.
I'm here. My greatest achievement. That's a tough one, actually, because I feel like I'm still in it, actually.
Mhm.
I'm proud of things that I've done, and definitely things have been memorable for me. Like, I do like directing in film, just like I do like directing in theater, and I probably didn't do enough of it before I transitioned over. Because I like working with actors, and I like creating and having conversations and all those kinds of things. Like, I have that background. And sometimes in film, it's just a technical thing. It's like, stand here, do this. Like, it's not very creative at times. But I do like that part. So some of the stuff that I'm proud of are just every one of the projects I've worked on, like, I really remember. It is nice to have done something with the film board. I did learn making the kind of films that I do takes a lot of energy. And so I'm not a director for hire. Like, I'm not a person that can just go on to a lifestyle show or go on to a, you know, like I'm not, when I direct something, it's because I want to shape it, mold it, and be a part of it. So a lot of the other industry stuff doesn't really appeal. And even though it's been offered to me, I've just never done it. But I'd say the other piece that I'm proud of is just, I don't know, helping people. My reputation, you know, when people talk about me, there's a sort of a reputation. So I hope it's a positive one, but I feel like you only have your reputation in the industry. So I like to think that people do feel that I care about what happens, that I'm helpful when I can be. Yeah, that if I can help somebody, I will. Because of the stresses in my job, like, I'm not in a position to do the things that people want, like when they want business affairs, but I'll say to them, I can guide you if you're willing to do the work. I'm willing to talk about what you need to do, but I don't have the time to do the work for you.
Mm.
So that's the difference. And I'm willing to teach you by learning by doing, by saying, look at this. This is what you do. These are the steps. That kind of thing. Because I'm a real big proponent of that. So yeah, I think it's more that I've helped different people along the way. I can't say that they you know, it's not like bosom buddy stuff. But I like to think that I help them. And sometimes it's a credit saying, thanks, Michelle, and sometimes there's not. And that's fine, because I know what I've done. So I think it's more that just knowing that you have a reputation, that you have contributed as much as you can. It's not always perfect, but it's better than being an a-hole and making things difficult and going down that slippery slope of like, that's not for me. And I'm not I'm not a good confrontation person either. So I don't tend to be the be like combatant one. That's just never been my style. So that can be a kind of a weakness sometimes, I feel, because I'm not willing to jump into the fray. I just want to have fun and create. I don't really want to fight, and I don't really want to
Yeah.
do that part. So
Bravo. Yay.
mhm.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I will just say, Michelle, I think you know this, but you do have one of the greatest reputations in the community, and you do help so many people. And I hope it's not to your detriment, because I know that sometimes I'm like, how much free consulting am I going to do on something? But you know what? That's where my mind went too. Is there's so much value in that that's not monetary, but sort of like the heart of like, oh, I unlocked something for someone, or oh, they had an aha moment because of a piece of information. It's big. It's an important thing. I did a lot of corporate video for a long time, and one of the recent projects I did just before COVID was working with an organization called the Brenda Strafford Foundation on training videos for their staff. And the training videos were about something they call the Brenda Strafford Way. And this was an attempt, and I don't know how effective it has been, but using video for good, using the power of filmmaking for good. It was about giving the staff at these seniors facilities tools to be, just to give those folks a better life, a better, so there were all these little tools like just spending more time with someone, asking real questions, not trying to rush. And of course they're battling against, not enough time and not enough money as well. And so it's hard to make that real, but it was cool to be a part of something that was like, oh, this is, some folks who are nonverbal, they might get like, grape juice is their favorite. And then the scary thing about it is they don't get a chance to change that. And now that's the rest of their life. Grape juice is going to be their lunch. And what if they start hating grape juice and want apple juice? Like those are the kinds of things that like are like, oh, okay, so we can use the medium for good. And then I'll take a little bit more time to indulge in, from a more artistic perspective, stuff I have no real control over, but the magic moments on set, and there haven't been that many opportunities for me, but to be able to direct. And I think of a moment in this movie we made called In Plain View, where Jesse Lipscomb is playing this really sort of psychopathic hired killer, and he's in someone else's home, sort of quietly investigating, and he starts to go through the cupboards. And I was like, yeah, just look around for it. And someone in the art department had put this open bag of chips in the cupboard. And he was like, oh, I'm taking one of those. And he has this brilliant moment where he's just eating while he's searching. And it was completely spontaneous. And it was just beautiful to have. And I didn't do anything about it, right? Like it was, but maybe it was, the accomplishment was getting there and putting the variables in place. So that's what those are the things that came to mind for me.
Cool. Well, you guys are all amazing, because you were talking about your greatest achievements and the things you've enjoyed the most, and they're all about contributing to the big picture, or helping others, or giving others credit. That's pretty amazing. So thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for all you do. That's beautiful. Does anybody have any other questions?
Oh, Valerie's current play is in the chat. I'm looking at that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. There's a link there.
I do. I have a question for both of you.
Yeah, please.
What excites you about film going forward? What excites you about what you do going forward?
That's a tough one.
It kind of harkens back to something I learned when I did Do Walk-a-Do, which was my first short, And it kind of resonates back to what Matt was saying when it's what excites me about filmmaking is the creator part of it. You create the situation, and then when you're looking at the footage, you see something that you didn't even expect, but it's there in the colors that are in the palette of the shot, or in the fact that you send your AD to go pick a street so that you could lay a track and do a dolly shot of a person on a bicycle, and he lays it in front of your childhood home without even knowing that that's your childhood home in the background. He did that all on his own. So for me, what excites me about the creative process is that other piece that is participating and unknown, but when you open your eyes to see it, it's there. And I think that every serious artist that's creating work knows what I'm talking about. And it's a hard thing to talk about because for some people it might sound kind of, airy-fairy and kind of like whatever. But I have found that is the gift that creativity gives to me for putting in the effort, for doing what I do to create. And it's a surprise, and it's always, it's bigger than you. It's bigger than you, right? And it shows up. So if we get awards or recognition, that's always nice because that comes from our peers and it comes from the industry. But really, when you look at the footage and you see the magical thing that happens, that's for us. That's ours. And it may not make the cut at the end of the day, right? Lots of things end up on the floor. That's our job as a director, is to make those sacrifices for that scene you absolutely feel like you have to have, but everyone says you don't really need it. And that's when you know you're being a director, because you're sacrificing that shot for the betterment of the whole. So I guess that's would be my answer, is that's been, and it still is, the greatest part of being an artist, whether we're writing, directing, drawing, acting, singing, crying, whatever it is.
I agree with you. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think the fact that you're aware of that thing that happens and that you celebrate it is so great, because I think it means when that happens, I think it means that there's some kind of flow that you're connected with. And then if, especially if others are involved, it's like you're in the same groove, and that's how things move forward in the best way, and yeah, sometimes you don't keep them, but it just means that there's something happening it's moving the project forward. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, and it's not ego, right? At the end of the day, we're not doing this because we have our egos that need stroking. Like it's, I think as you do more work, you start to realize that like it's a much bigger thing than just getting your overhead, getting your producer fee, like those hoops that you're jumping through. Like I like to feel that as artists, we're going deeper than that. And that's what we take with us at the end of the day. Like, I'm not saying that a zillion people saw Return Home or a zillion people saw Do Waka Do. I know that's not true. But when I made that film, I took that crew on a journey, and they're never going to forget it. Every crew that went on that journey is never going to forget it. So, and that's it, right? I mean, when our story's done, it's only our memories, and then that's it. So
the memories of the journey, for sure. Yeah,
right? That's the thing. And what we created to do it. So
beautiful. Cool.
Well, what an incredible evening it's been. It's a little after 9, so maybe that's a wrap. You're welcome to, I'm not interrupting you and telling you to stop or anything, but we are coming towards the end, and I just want to say thank you from the programming committee and EAR for joining us. It's been a great evening.
Yeah, Yeah, we can certainly, thank you, Carolyn. Sorry. We can certainly stick around if any of you want to keep talking. We can just stay on here for a while. It's all good.